Thank you for joining the marketing show. My name is Matthew Kilmurry, founder and CEO of apartmentgeofencing.com and hotelgeofencing.com, and I am your host. We've got an exciting show today on a topic that's gaining a lot of attention this year. So let's dig right in. Joining us today is Brian Hedge. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So I've known Brian for quite some time. Brian has been in the digital marketing space for the last 15 years, with the last 10 of those focused in multifamily, when I actually hired him at AvalonBay and then Willowbridge. And it's so awesome to see, like, when we get connected in certain ways, and then just seeing somebody's career take off has been amazing to watch. He recently transitioned to the customer experience role and serves as the Senior Director of Customer Experience at KETTLER. So welcome, Brian.
Yeah, thank you. I should mention that when you hired me, and I never told you this, I actually doubled my salary. So for everybody that wants to work for apartment geofencing, Matthew will double your salary. Just go in thinking that the whole way.
If I had the power, I would have doubled your salary.
Yeah.
But I don't. Unfortunately, I didn't carry that much weight. But it was an.
Yeah.
I do remember though that it was an easy choice. There are some hiring rounds where you're like, wow, we got some great candidates, and I remember this is the guy, and it worked out fantastic.
Well, thank you. I have no regrets. It was fantastic, and I'm really glad to be in the industry because I've met a lot of great people. And like you said, like it's one of those you kind of cross paths with everyone. It's very relationship oriented. So.
Well, and when you start in this industry, you can never leave.
You can't.
You can't. I actually tried. So after Avalon, I went into the nonprofit world for a couple of years, but only lasted a couple of years until multifamily like sucked me back in. But I do love it. It's such a great.
I try to decide with whether if you wanted to leave, could you? Because I've sent my resume to other companies and they're just like, what? What are you going to do? And I think that kind of speaks to the apartment industry, just with marketing being so unique that like I can't go to Procter and Gamble and be like, hey, I know how to do marketing. And they're like, yeah, but you know how to do marketing for apartments. We sell other things. And I think just as a country, that's just where marketing has gone. It's gotten very specialized.
It has gotten very specialized, but I think that, part of even just this topic that we're talking today, multifamily, has come a long way since I started in the industry in 2008. And it really delves into, a big piece of this, which is the customer experience. So let's start with that. Let's start with customer experience and the birth of the customer and employee advocate, right? So we'll touch on this. So for you, what are some of the key elements of creating a memorable customer experience?
Well, I think when you think of the customer, you really have to get through their lens and you have to see what they're seeing and hear what they're hearing. And that's really about figuring out what the touch points are and then maximizing them. Thinking through what is your standard process? How can you improve it? How can you measure it? And that's when you start to really build your customer experience programs. You start removing hurdles. You start thinking through the settings. You start to really look at, how do we align expectations? Because that is a big kind of strain between residents and our teams. But that's really where you're going with it. And as we're developing programs, we're really thinking through how the data impacts that and how we gather that data and then think through the programming that really improves customer experience for our teams.
Well, I think that data will help you align expectations because you can set expectations with your internal teams and say, this is what we're seeing. And then, try to implement that with customers and then measure it kind of going forward, saying, are we meeting these customer expectations with the experience, because expectations have changed when it comes to where I'm going to rent. I think for a long time, we maybe didn't think that we had to live up to maybe the same kind of expectations that you would at like a Hilton or a Marriott. But that has changed. People's, renter expectations have gone really high. And so has employees. So how can management companies cultivate customer advocates and then turn them into brand ambassadors?
We've seen that as well. And you almost, it's condo-like is the product they want, or it's hotel-like is the product they want. In that it can be really difficult for a team to support. I mean, if you think of a hotel, how many staff members are there to curate that experience? Or a condo having a sort of fee structure or sort of teams that really help with that. And you really have to think through, like, a lot of this comes from how do we develop it through leadership. And we have found that the teams on the ground, our operations teams, they are phenomenal problem solvers. They will figure out a solution that is best for the customer, that works for them. And we really want to think through how we support them, how we establish consistency, and how do we build that advocacy. And a lot of that comes from talking to the teams, supporting the teams, and really understanding what is their day to day, and then going in there and being like, well, how do we help you? Or how do we take something that you've learned and bring it out to other people? How do we change training? We've done a lot more on the sales side than we've ever done in the past when we think through training. And you've had that exposure as well, where Bozzuto really kind of invented that level of we're having those extensive amount of training, having that week-long training, but that is not the norm for a lot of the industry. And we are getting closer and closer to that because we have to build that sort of branding around our employees, and we have to build that sort of training and that understanding. And that's what's coming. Like, we just have to have a more robust, because coming out of COVID, we had this huge turnover problem, and we had this huge issue, and this erosion of our workforce at the property really hurts what we want to do from a programming standpoint, really hurts what we want to do as a property manager, as we want to support owners. And we just have to get better and better to really support that.
You know, that's so key, because I think we've come a long way also in like the digital UX, right? From the shopping to the research to the, you know, the connecting and the leasing process, kind of all that stuff. But it can all just, you know, fall flat. All that work can fall flat from that first personal experience with somebody. You know, customer experience revolves so much around interpersonal. And I think of, you know, I love the Marriott brand. I use it pretty much everywhere I go. But it only takes that one person at the front desk to just, you know, really bring down a level for me. And so it's such a huge piece. And that starts with the leadership, because if leadership isn't going to support the teams, then they'll never get there.
Yep. And we've started to do it now. And this is kind of new. We've started to do this in the last couple of weeks, when we really started looking at our maintenance tickets and how often teams interact with maintenance members. And we found that a third of people never have a maintenance ticket. So they don't really interact with most of our staff during their stay in our apartments. But a good portion of people, most of their interaction and that biggest touch point is the maintenance team. And then you really have to think through, well, how do you support them? How do you impact the communication? How do you help them? Because they are the ones that are doing a lot of that touch point. And if one is bad, then you're right. That hurts the whole customer experience, and you don't get to keep that lease.
And if one is good, that's when somebody's going to be most likely to write a great review for you. You know, like,
yeah, it's good and achievable. They have fixed something that is fixable. Like, it's you haven't gone above and beyond. You haven't gone in and be like, all right, here's tickets to Disney World. I hope you have a great experience. You haven't done that. You haven't spent more money. You've just kind of done what they thought you would do. You fixed what needed to be fixed, or you supported them in a certain thing that they needed to do. So
yeah, it's such a key touch point. And so, speaking of employees, how can management companies integrate employee advocacy into their marketing strategy?
I think for us, we've done more and more to interview them, and more to set up councils and really get their voice, really get their understanding, have a lot more events. A lot of times, multifamily can sometimes feel a little bit like feudalism, where a property is on its own and they don't feel that connection to a corporate office, or they don't feel that connection to within a region. So if you're able to extend that interaction, but like, if you just talk to a property manager at a lease up for an hour, you'll learn everything you need to know to tell the development team we shouldn't do this again. And like, it's building that in and building that cadence in. And now we do interviews with every single lease up, and we're really kind of in, be like, all right, what are the materials? What are all these things that we can come back to and say, all right, how do we improve it? And a lot of times you'll talk to teams and be like, no one ever asked me. I told all these people, but no one really documented it. No one looked through the data. No one created this report. And if you're able to do that, then you're able to kind of build better buildings. You're able to have better product. You're able to think through better training, stuff like that. So it's really about interviewing them, connecting them. it becomes even a little bit bigger when you think through, all right, well, what is the support that we get for their career development? That's when you really think through next level of, now that we're supporting them, how do we grow them with the organization? Because if they are promoted within the organization, they become champions and they support your programs and stuff like that.
I would say, one piece of advice I have on this is to always continue to do property tours, because it's, especially now that, post COVID, a lot of kind of corporate staff is expecting to either be remote or hybrid. But our leasing teams, we're expecting them to be there every day, our leasing and maintenance teams. So, okay, you're on site, but we get to work from home. And so it's just creating an additional divide that was kind of already there. It feels like the divide has widened. And you just stepping onto a property, it just brings it all home. And so no matter whether you used to work on property, but now you're, a regional manager, a regional SVP, or you moved into a support team, getting back on property is so huge. I'll tell a story. So when I worked at Bizzuto, one morning, Tom Bizzuto said, "Hey, do you want to join me on a property tour this morning?" I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." So we jumped in his car, and come to find out that every Friday he would just do a random property tour, right? And he maybe hit up one or two. And of course, the first property he went to, some phone calls would be made, and now they would know he was in the area. So like everyone else was ready. But the first property that we went to, we get out, we walk in, and there's I think it was a lease consultant behind a desk, and she's on her phone, and she goes, "Hello," right? And just didn't even look up, just like, "Hi," just scrolling on her phone. And he said, "My name is Tom Bizzuto, and when a customer walks in the door, you stand up and greet them." And I just wanted to like melt into a puddle because I'm like witnessing this. But I can tell you that person ended up becoming did move on to a fast track of promotion within the company. I mean, it just, what a way to impart onto somebody that, the owner of the company believes in the customer experience, and it just makes its way into everybody. So it gets back to what you were saying about leadership. It starts with leadership.
It does not have to be negative. It is not like you're going in there and you're just like, here's just kind of the expectation. You're not going in there to like, slap fingers and stuff like that. And you're really just saying like, hey, I just noticed this. Like, can we work on this? And I think that is the more positive element to it. But you're 100% right. I mean, I did like 200 property tours, and there were only a few were ours. Like there were a lot of competitors. So I get called a lot from calls or people are like, "Hey, did you like your tour in Wilmington?" And I'm like, "I don't live there. I'm sorry."
That's great. All right, so we've talked a lot about customer experience, and so now let's like move down the funnel a little bit, if you will, and talk about how to market and how to use data and insights to support program. So let's start a little high level. For you, what are the fundamental principles of effective marketing in today's digital landscape?
Well, I think it goes back to where it generally should go back, and where you're thinking through the ROI of it. It's not always the easiest thing, but when you want to think through your right partner, the right advertising source, a lot of thinking through just what is the right spot in time that you're able to get in front of it, everybody. I did this a couple months ago where we had a bunch of interns in our office, and I was like, "Hey, what websites do you go to?" And I was like, "Where do you go? ESPN, CNN?" And they're like, "No, I go to TikTok and I go to Twitter and I go to this." And I was like, "Wait, like you never go to these websites?" And they're like, "No, I've never been to a website." And like that's when you really get the profound difference between myself, who's like almost over 40 years old, and then a 20-year-old. They just consume the internet so differently, and it's always changing. But that's where like that's the mix of where's the ROI, but then are you reaching the people that you think are going to live in your apartment building?
Yeah. And I think ROI in our industry is the understanding of it's changing in a good way. I'll make a little bit of a plug for Multifamily Marketing East. Anybody watching who hasn't joined the wait list to come to the event in May, definitely do that. One of the topics is going to be, marketing metrics are changing because cookies are being phased out. And so some of that like cost per lease, cost per lead is going to get harder to quantify. And so when thinking of ROI, the way I've always viewed it is you've got your funnel, you've got branding awareness, you've got like findability, advocacy, which is like reviews, then like the conversion piece of it. and understanding what is my ROI in each bucket, because cost per lease doesn't work for every part of my marketing mix, right? Cost per lease works great for ILSs. That's a good way to determine which one's doing best. But in, you know, branding and awareness, which could be like what we do in geofencing or paid social or YouTube or streaming TV and stuff like that, it could be, you know, visits to my website, or just reach in certain areas. And then being able to say, okay, this is my ROI for this piece of it. It's gonna get 20% of my budget. And so how do I, you know, optimize based on the on my, you know, my main metrics for this, versus in the review piece or like local listings and SEO could be something different. And so picking my mix and then picking my numbers in each one, because you, as a marketer, we need levers to pull in order to improve campaigns and make them perform better. And each bucket kind of has its own lever.
Yep. And you can be strategic with it. Like, and that's where you want to think through, like, where is my customer? How can I be strategic and think through it? But I mean, I almost feel like prospects are visiting properties less. We're seeing 2 to 4 properties when it used to be 5 or 6. They're not spending as much time shopping as much. Like, you need to get in the consideration set. And in ILS, you are still competing with 200, 500 other properties as people are searching. It is still a competitive environment, even though you have a listing there. The ability to get ahead of that, even though you might not have that ROI directly, could be really effective, I think.
Well, especially we spend so much money on developing these brands and beautiful amenities and features, picking the right neighborhoods for our properties. But we've, you know, on paid search, it's everyone's got the same text box, the same number of characters. On ILS is the same slideshow. And so any ways that you can get people to your website is just a huge leg up, because it really sets you apart for sure.
Well, and you think you have a little bit of this too, like especially if you're thinking through pull strategies, and we're thinking of it more and more because we have large projects in Tampa, we have large projects in other cities where you're thinking through placemaking as well. And placemaking, placemaking doesn't work with the ILS because the ILS doesn't know it's good. It doesn't have enough, you know, apartments in the area. But if you're able to kind of use that to kind of pull a little bit, to kind of get people entertained, to use your branding, that's where placemaking is a little bit more effective because you do have a lot of branding and you are trying to sell a bigger story that you're trying to do. And that is when it comes really effective. But that is a very difficult ROI. Like, you are creating a place. How am I supposed to tell people like, oh, it's great, this is a great ROI? But you really have to think through like, what is the strategic impact of that? So,
yeah. So how can, so speaking of, how can businesses leverage data insights to then tailor their marketing strategies and messaging?
well, I think you always want to go back to the data when you can. And I think a lease up is always a fun, wonderful testing ground for a lot of different options that you want to do. The data at the end of the lease up really tells you what you can keep and not keep. That's why I think it's profoundly important for that first 12 months, first 18 months. We are starting to see, and it's something we're exploring and trying to learn a bit more. There is a little bit of a shift in your customers as you go from year 1 to year 2. Obviously, year 1, you have people that are looking for a lot more specials. They're looking for a new product offering. But year 2 is completely changing. So the more information you have about your customers and who are coming, that's when you can really use that data to say, all right, what am I keeping? What can be really effective in year 2, year 3, especially when you think marketing budgets are half or 30% of what they might have been during a lease up period.
I'll be speaking at AIM next week on leveraging anonymous mobile location data to help kind of craft marketing strategies. And I think it's a piece that is underutilized within multifamily. Retail uses it all the time. They've been using it for years. But you can see where people are migrating from, especially if you're in a market like Tampa. Where are they coming from? What are their brand affinities? What are their demographic information in terms of like age and household income and kind of all that stuff. Not to target for advertising, because we don't do that within fair housing, but it helps us craft our messages. So you can use data like that to understand how to connect with people so that they see you for who you really are and they get excited about the property.
Well, and we've started, and that's kind of where customer experience is kind of melding, because customer experience is really just trying to grab data from all these sources. But when we start thinking about our customer and we start thinking about our sales training and our sales program and thinking like how it fits into certain things, like that's when you can really go like, all right, can I provide some of this data, and will it help this team? Will it help development do something differently? Will it help them do something differently? And that's where I'm really like either apartment geofencing, or we've leaned on a lot of our other vendors to be like, you have something. There's something here that we can use and bring in. But a lot of times it's like looking under a mattress to be like, oh, okay, yeah, this can tell us something. But that's really like we're just picking at these data sources to get a lot more. And I'm not going to AIM, but I would love to see that presentation on the mobile, because I think that's where we're there. Like if we're really wanting to learn something, it is so difficult to learn something about our customer from traditional methods, especially even if you have like a robust market research team. Like they are using census data, they're using limited data sources. The data sources that'll have more value are the ones that you can pull from your vendors or your own residents if you have a big enough portfolio.
Yeah, because when I think about mobile location data, is people voting with their feet. So they may do in a market survey, oh, I love to go to Whole Foods. But then you look at the data and you're like, well, actually, you're going to Walmart. Like you don't have to kid it, like we know for real. But for any suppliers and partners out there, I hope you heard what Brian said, which was each one of our partners has data that we need for our customer experience. And there's a little bit of frustration and you have to kind of look under the mattress. So, know your own data and then provide it in small, easy to digest snippets for your partners, and management companies that you work with, so that they get more value out of it. They can help their own customer experience.
Yep.
So,
yep. And you think about, so we're out of time, but I would just say, if you think about in property tech, like especially like door locks, stuff like that, there's so many things on a property that'll really tell you what's happening, what the tour path is, and what's happening. It's just we're almost there. We're not there yet with a lot of our partners. So,
we did a survey of our clients, and I'll end with this, that we have a dashboard. You can go in at any time. We also do push reports that kind of have it all laid out and everything. We also send an email, about 5 days after the month closes, with just a couple of bullet points, like what's working, what's not, what needs to change. And by far, that's the thing that our clients like the most, is that if they never get a chance to log into all the dashboards, we got 1 million dashboards, they get 1 million reports. They know they're going to get an email with a couple bullet points. And so I think that really connects here, and then be thinking about our clients' customer experience. What in our data can help them understand their customers better?
yeah,
So,
and they're searching,
Brian,
and like adding a narrative. Yep.
Yes, adding to the narrative. Well, thank you so much for being a guest today. I really appreciate it. We can do this all day. It's like talking shop. Yes. And thank you to all of you on LinkedIn. I really appreciate it. I hope you join me again. Until then, love the journey, my friends.
Yeah. Thanks.